Welcome everyone. So this is our college and career day. This is our fourth time doing this event. We change it a little bit every year, but we keep a lot the same. So we're really excited. I will introduce kind of the format to you and what happens after right now. So right now we're going to do an opening panel. We've got some special guests that I will introduce in a moment, just to kind of share some general advice and thoughts with you all to get you in the mindset to think about college and career. After that, we've got 2 sessions of workshops where you can choose the topic that feels most relevant to you. I will go over those workshops in detail before we split up, but that's kind of the general format of today. Families and students are welcome to go to different places if you feel like you have different interests or you want to divide and conquer and get as much information as you need. That's great too. So, I'm very excited today. We often have one person speak for this opening part, but today we've decided to have 4 panelists come to share some advice with you as you kind of embark on this journey. So I'm going to ask my panelists to come up now, and then I'm actually going to have them introduce themselves. Great, so if each of you could just say your name and whether we have some alum up here and we have some representatives from colleges, so whether you're an alum or where you work, what college you work at, and then we'll get started with questions.
Good morning everyone, my name is Ricardo Bonon. I graduated in 2009 from Somerville High School. Graduated from college in 2013, and I actually volunteer here every other Friday, actually working with Melanie.
Good morning, my name is Paige Lane Miller. I am an alumni here from 2008. I graduated with my healthcare management degree in 2012 and my MBA in 2015.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Allison Handy. I'm one of the Assistant Directors of Admissions at Middlesex Community College.
Hi everyone, my name is Sean Ashburn and I work in undergraduate admissions at Tufts University.
Great, so we've invited our 4 panelists here because they have a variety of perspectives to help you kind of figure out, as you're figuring out what you want to do after high school and how to go about that. We thought they would have some advice to share. So for our alumni, a lot of our students take different paths: 4-year college, 2-year college, work, military. So can you talk to us about why you took the path that you did after high school?
I'd have to say the reason why I took the path that I did was I actually played basketball in college, so I got recruited by a lot of schools. It came down to Salem State, Riviera College, and WPI, Worcester Polytech Institute, and I decided to go to Worcester Polytech Institute. Originally, I wanted to major in psychology because I wanted to be a guidance counselor, which is one of the reasons why I still help out now. But I had to change my major, so I ended up graduating management engineering with a concentration in manufacturing engineering. I currently work at Raytheon in Andover, but that kind of was the reason why I decided to go to WPI, but I did have to change my major, which was, I don't regret it, but it's value add now, I guess.
All right, the reason why I picked the career path that I did, okay, so I was a basketball player here at Somerville High School. I played throughout my high school years, so I was on the varsity team. I wanted to play basketball at a 4-year college, so I was determined to be in a 4-year college. So I got recruited and went off to Springfield American International College, where I played for 2 years. I actually was undecided major because I wasn't sure what career path I wanted to go through. My parents wanted me to be a nursing student, and I definitely didn't want to go into nursing school. I decided to be a healthcare management major, where I wanted to be in the healthcare arena and grow there, so I decided to take the business route of healthcare. I then graduated from there and went for my MBA. I wanted a broader version of business and the curriculum that I didn't have as a healthcare management focus. So.
As we talk about kind of, first step is thinking about what path you want to take, right? But then there's actually taking that path, which is quite involved as well. So the actual application process. Could you both talk about what the application process is like at your institutions? And feel free to expand to, Tufts is different than UMass, and Middlesex might be different than Bunker Hill, but your specific institutions, what is the application process like, and how is that similar or different to other 2 or 4 year institutions?
So at community colleges in general, the application process, and I'll speak specifically to Middlesex, the application process is there is no application fee, there's no application essay, and pretty much for our open door programs, which is a lot of our programs, you're going to apply and you will get in. As long as you graduate from high school, you will get in. We do have programs now that are what we call selective programs, and we have a lot of medical majors, and then some of the majors are non-medical, but they have additional requirements because we have certain accreditation standards from various organizations that require a certain level of student achievement before they are admitted to the program. One of the things I will say about community colleges, and you look at the admissions process, a lot of people will ask and they'll say, well, how come there isn't more required? Are students going to get the quality education at a community college because you don't have a hefty admissions requirement? And one of the things I'll tell them is, we're not looking at how you did in high school, because we recognize that students will always have a time where something challenging, something difficult and unexpected comes about. So we're not rating you on how well you did in high school. We want to make sure you graduate, and we want to make sure that you're capable of doing the work. So they'll take their college placement tests when they come in so that we can place them accurately. But what we're looking at is where you are right now in your journey. Whether you had a time in high school where you just kind of blew it off, or whether you just had difficult situations, we're looking at where you are right now. Are you ready to do this journey? Are you ready to now take on and work hard to show that you're able to do this? We have students who come in who are honors students. We have students who come in who are, who may need developmental coursework, students who come in at the college level. We have a whole range of students. But what we're looking at is, are you ready to make the commitment to be successful in your life? And we're opening the door to everybody to take that opportunity and now do something with it, despite what's occurred during those high school years.
So I'll start off and say, just like there are a lot of differences between 2-year colleges and 4-year colleges, even within 4-year colleges, the kind of application and admissions process really varies a lot. So there are some 4-year colleges where they use a primarily sort of number-driven system to decide which applicants are admitted and which ones are not. So they might just look at a graph of a student's GPA and or SAT scores and use that to determine who gets in, who might be waitlisted, so students who are sort of in a maybe zone, and then students who are denied. There are other colleges, often private universities like Tufts, that practice what's called holistic admissions. And that just means that we use a whole bunch of factors to really decide which students we want to accept, partly because we get a lot more qualified or strong applicants than we have space for. So because we have a small acceptance rate, we really want to decide the students who are the best fit for us and the students who are most really excited about our school. And so we're able to use, obviously, a student's academic achievement from high school, looking at their grades and their test scores and the classes they took at their high school as really important factors that predict kind of their level of academic preparation for our school. And on top of that, we look at sort of personal factors and think about, what is this student's, area of interest? What are these students' passions? What are they thinking about doing in the future? What are their priorities? What are they enthusiastic about? What are they excited about? All of those are sort of bigger factors that aren't really on paper that we can get a sense of from each applicant through things like letters of recommendation that come from their teacher or their counselor, from the activities they've been involved with outside of the classroom, and especially from the essays that they write. So at Tufts, we require 4 essays from every single applicant, and we spend a lot of time reading those because they tell us about the student's voice and their personality and their interests in a way that helps distinguish each student from another. And so that's a really important factor in us being able to build a community that we think is going to be diverse and engaged and excited and enthusiastic And so that's a really big part of our process. The other piece is that we really want to see students who feel connected to the specific mission and fit of our school, right? So we're primarily a liberal arts college, and that means that we want students to come and get a broad range of education, to not just specialize in one area, but to see value in studying kind of across the whole academic spectrum. And so when we're reading applications, if a student says, I'm really excited about Tufts because I want to be a nurse, well, number one, we don't have a nursing major, and number two, that's very much a sort of traditional or narrow career path, right, where a student's going to get intensive training to be able to go on a specific career path, and that's not really the vibe of our school. And so that's a part of our review. It's a part of how we read applications, and there are a lot of very highly selective colleges like us that sort of do things that way, in that we want to see students who get what we offer and are actually seeking the experience that we can provide.
Thank you. So as you, for Beijing and Ricardo, as you hear them talk about the college process, you might be having flashbacks to your own experience, hopefully positive ones. Can you talk about what your application process was like in high school, maybe who you worked with, or maybe it was just you doing it on your own, and kind of who your supports were and any advice you have for going through that process. What was your process like senior year? Who helped you, and what advice would you give?
I'd have to say I had a lot of help from my older sister. She's only a year and a half older than me, and she actually went to Somerville High School, so she kind of helped me through the process. My mother doesn't really know too much about the process. She's actually from Haiti. She doesn't actually speak English as well. The guidance department definitely helped me out a lot, and this is kind of why I come back and help out myself, because it can be a stressful process. It's not easy. And when you're applying to so many schools, all schools have different requirements, so I would have to say, I would recommend just using the resources. They're here to help you. They're not too far away, they're in the same building, as we know, so just utilize the resources you have, ask a lot of questions, and just be persistent.
The resources that I reached out to were pretty much the guidance counselor that was provided for Somerville High. I asked a lot of questions. There was also the Boston Public Library that helped me with financial aid, because I'm a first generation student, so my mom didn't really know much. She just provided all the resources that I asked for to get the proper stuff to complete and done at the deadline that was needed. But my recommendation is pretty much just ask questions, because the resources are there.
So I'll open the last question up to everyone, and then we'll ask the audience for any questions that you all have. So you're getting a warning that we're going to ask you for questions in a minute, so start thinking. So my last question for you all is just general advice. So we have a variety of students in the room from 9th through 12th grade and families. Or we actually probably don't have any 12th graders. 9th through 11th grade. And who are in various places in their process. So what advice do you have as they're maybe just starting to think about this process, or maybe they're in 11th grade and they're really feeling like, man, I really got to dive into this. What advice do you have for them as they figure out their path, or just about kind of going through the application process? And anybody who feels the most excited can start.
I'm really big on planning. I do it a lot in work, and I tend to over-plan sometimes. So it's never too early. Just because you're a 9th grader doesn't mean you can't start thinking about college. Doesn't mean you can't start thinking about your career. It's very difficult, and even now I'm starting to think, like, I don't necessarily like my job 100%, but it definitely does what I need it to currently. And I do so many things outside of work that it kind of keeps me busy, but I like to plan everything out to a T, so I would definitely recommend planning and starting the process very, very early.
Just to piggyback off Ricardo, I would say planning is really important, of course. I would say go on college visits. Like, try to put yourself in situations where you could experience what this college has to offer. Make a list of what you like and don't like, and it kind of helps with your decision from there. I'm sure that the admissions would love to take you on a tour and show you around and share all the information about the school. So being in the school environment helps out with the decision. So if you make a list and schedule those appointments with admissions, then the process will be a lot easier.
Just to expand upon what she just said, I think going to visit a college is probably one of the most important things you should do. As you prepare for the application process, that's important too. But I think one of the things that you get by going to visit that you don't get by just filling out an application and doing research online is that you get to feel what it's like to be on that campus. You'll get to see some of the students, you'll get to see some of the faculty and staff. You'll get to see the environment that you will pretty much be living in for however long you're at that institution. And it does make a difference in terms of your overall experience there, whether or not you feel welcome, whether or not you feel like this is someplace I like, whether it's the suburbs versus the city. Some people will tell you, I love the city life, but if you choose a campus that's suburban and it's tucked away and you're not used to that lifestyle, it is kind of challenging when you first get there. So you're really thinking about that transition overall, but going to visit I think is important. In terms of figuring out your pathway, if you're someone who's sitting there, sitting here, and you're saying, I'm not so sure what I might want to do, whether it's your parents think one thing and you think another, or it's just you conflicted by so many different majors and potential careers, a suggestion is to volunteer. You don't have to commit to long hours. You can say just 1 or 2 hours. I just like to come and see what a day in the life is like of someone who's a counselor, or someone who works in a dentist's office. And you pick that person's brain and you say, tell me what's your best day like, tell me what's your worst day like. And then you can make notes and you can determine for yourself, can I handle the best day and can I handle the worst day? I think one of the most challenging things to do is to just kind of go off and say, you know, this is definitely what I want to do. And you haven't done any background checking of, is this something that I can handle for the rest of my life? Because whatever career path you change, the long-term hope is that it's something that you're going to love for the rest of your life, not something that you're going to, you know, love for 5 years and then in 5 years say, oh my gosh, this is not what I want to do. So I would strongly recommend, if you're uncertain, go volunteer and chat with someone and say, can I just pick your brain for a little bit and get a sense of what it's like?
I'll actually echo both of Allison's points in that if there's an adult that you know who has a job that seems really interesting and cool and appealing to you, if you have a conversation with that person, ask them to sort of work backwards to the important points in their life, whether that's other jobs they had or their education that sort of allowed them to have access to that career path and that career opportunity. Sort of think through what was their journey and how can you maybe follow that or mirror that. What are the opportunities that you need to take advantage of to be able to get to where they are if that's the spot that you want to be at. Also along the lines of college visits, I think if you're in 9th or 10th grade, don't go into that process thinking that you should be going to visit schools to see if you love that school. Just go into it with sort of exploration in mind, right? So if you're going to go visit a place like BU or Northeastern, you can think of that as like, okay, what does it mean to go to a large university that's right in the heart of a city? Or if you go to visit a place like UMass Amherst, what is it like to go to a campus that's farther away from the city? Rather than kind of focusing on the particulars of do I like this school or not, if you're just starting out in this process, you just want to get a sense of the setting and the culture and the academic opportunities and the sort of, you know, what's available as far as resources or experiences in that place. And then you sort of over time get to narrow your list and think more specifically about individual schools that you like. But when you're just starting out, keep it general. Keep it about location and majors and size and setting, and really just focus on those kind of bigger, broader categories before you commit to anything. I think my last piece of advice, especially if you're really early in this process, people will ask, how do I best prepare my application to get into a place like Tufts? And more than anything to do with extracurricular activities or essays or interviews or any of that, the number one factor for us and for so many other schools, whether they're 2-year or 4-year, is really going to be the academic achievement that a student has had in high school. So more important than anything, if you're thinking of going to a 4-year college especially, working hard and earning good grades in the classes you're taking right here, right now, is the actual number one thing you can do to be able to set yourself up for success.
So things we're going to cover today, I'll talk a little bit about the timeline. So everyone in here is a junior or the family of a junior, I'm guessing, unless we have some really eager sophomores, which is okay. And so from basically now until next winter, I'll talk a little bit about what you should be doing now and what you should be doing then. I will talk a little bit about what actually is in a college application. So Sean spoke a little bit about that, but what's included when we talk about the college application, what is actually included in that? So I will go into all of those details. I'll talk a little bit about what students are responsible for versus what families are responsible for versus what we are responsible for as a school. So we'll get into that, and then I'll talk a little bit about Somerville High. So the timeline. So before senior year, this means now, over the summer, before you come here on August 30th, or whatever the first day is this year, these are some of the things that you want to do. Now, this doesn't mean that you do these things once and then you're done, right, and then you don't come back to them. A lot of this is you're going to start the process now, and then you're going to be continuing to work on it in your senior year. So, one thing that's very important is you want to meet with your counselor. Many of you may have already done that. Your counselors are reaching out to you to have meetings about your college process. If they haven't done that yet, it just might mean that they haven't quite gotten to you yet. But you're welcome to kind of go to them and say, hey, I'm really eager to have this meeting, and they will do that with you. Just to go over, they're your counselor, so that's Mr. LaBerge, Mr. Rochelle, Ms. Keymont, always want to say mom, Ms. Keymont, Ms. McGuire, or Ms. Eden. Those are the people that are really going to be bringing you through this process. So you want to make sure you're connecting with them about this. Can you just make sure it doesn't go crazy? Thanks. The other thing, this is still. All right, you're going to complete a counselor brag sheet on Naviance. So this is something that we'll be working on with students, and we'll be sending information about and sending emails to you about. But there is something called a counselor brag sheet. This is really important that you get this done now. It's basically a survey about yourself. Your counselor should know you pretty well by now, but there might be some things that they don't, or they don't know that you really want to be highlighted as they write your recommendation. So this is an opportunity for you to talk about what you've been involved with, and not just listing what you've been involved with, but what has been the most important thing you've been involved with? Why is that important to you? So if the more robust that counselor brag sheet is, the more your counselor is going to have to work with, both in the process and guiding you through this process, but also in writing your letter of recommendation. So that's something you're going to want to start this year. It's going to be a while. The other thing you want to do is register for and hopefully take your SATs, ACTs, or subject tests. The SAT is offered May, June, and August. Those are the tests that are left before senior year. I highly recommend that you take at least one of those. The ACT is in June, July, and then I think September, but that's during senior year. So you can take, I'll get into the kind of SAT, ACT in a little bit. You can take either the SAT or the ACT, but it's important to take one of them sooner rather than later for a couple reasons. One, senior year gets really busy. This college application process can be really overwhelming, and to be taking your first SAT in your senior year is going to feel even more overwhelming. The other reason is you want to get a little bit of data about how you do, because that might change what schools you're looking at. Now, it doesn't mean that your score is your score and you can never improve that. You certainly can. And certain schools care more about SAT than others, for sure. But you need to have that information so that you can be making smart decisions about what schools are my reaches and what schools are my safeties. So I highly recommend you doing that. You sign up for that on the College Board website. The deadline for the May test was actually yesterday. We're in the late registration period, so you can still register. There's just an extra fee. If you qualify for free or reduced lunch, you can get a fee waiver from us, so you don't have to pay for it. You get 2 free SATs and 2 free subject tests. I'm not going to get into subject tests a lot. If you want to know more about this, Mr. Rochelle is doing a workshop next, but subject tests are hour-long tests about a specific subject. So there's like literature and history and chemistry and physics and languages. Some schools require them. Not very many, but some schools do require them, and sometimes for a specific major they're required. So you just want to be aware that those exist, and you might want to take those. Gosh, I'm tired. All right, the next thing you want to do is start your college list. So you're going to want to start to think about. Now, for some juniors, that means you're putting every single school that you're even remotely considering on a list, and you wind up with like 25 schools by the time, and that's okay, because you're going to get rid of a lot of them. For some juniors, it means you don't really know, but you know you like these 2 schools, and at least that's somewhere to start. But you need to start thinking about which colleges you might be interested in, okay? My workshop next session will be about kind of how to use resources to create that college list, but we can certainly help. Your counselor can help you with that, but you really should be starting a list. Now, that list could be completely different senior year. You might start off with 5 schools this year, and then you don't apply to any of them in senior year. But that's part of the process. You need to start that process now as you figure out what you're looking for in schools. I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump down a little bit to visiting colleges. That's part of this process, right? You start a list. Maybe you start because, like, I don't know, my cousin went there, or I've heard of it, or you do a search on College Board and you come up with a list of schools, and then you visit a school and you realize, just like Allison and Sean were talking about, oh wait, hold on. This isn't actually what I'm looking for, right? I actually don't want a school in the city, or I don't want a really big school, or I don't want a really small school. And that's important because then you're going to go back to your list and you're going to say, okay, well maybe I need to add more schools that are in the city or that are rural or whatever. So that is an important part of the process. I highly recommend you, if you're not doing anything for April break, if you're not going off to Costa Rica like a lot of people, then use April break to go visit schools. Use the summer to go visit schools. Very, very important to get out there. Okay, I'll jump back up. The teacher recommendation brag sheet is similar to the counselor brag sheet, which we'll be sending out to you. We'll be giving students instructions on. It's on your Naviance account. Again, that's really important to put some effort into. That's what your teachers are going to use to help you write, or to write your recommendation. Which means that simultaneously, you also need to be thinking about who might write my letters of recommendation. I am going to get into that in a minute about how to make that decision. But you want to start that process of thinking about that. You want to create a common application account. I'll talk about the common application to explain what that is, but you want to start that now. Sean from Tufts is doing a workshop on that next session, so if you want to learn more about that, he can help you. And then you want to start your college essay. It is like the single greatest gift you can give yourself to have a good draft of your essay before you walk in here senior year. It will change. It might change. You're going to edit it. You might even throw it out. But by having at least one solid draft by the time you walk into senior year, it's going to reduce so much stress for you. It's a big part of the process, and I highly recommend you use your summer to get that essay started. Thank you. All right, during senior year, again, a lot of this is just a continuation of what I just said, so I'll go through it fairly quickly. You're going to meet with your counselor again, more than one time probably. Your counselor is going to be important. You're going to finalize your college list. You're going to actually do the applications, okay? You're going to complete them and submit them. I'll talk about that in a minute. You're going to go through you're going to formally ask for your recommendations. Don't worry about the yellow sheet, pink sheet, but there's a formal request on Naviance. There's going to be a process we'll go over with you. There's a form you have to give your teachers. You have to do that next year. You might want to take the SAT or ACT again. A lot of times people take it 2 times. 3 times is a little bit of a stretch, and any more than 3, I would say, let's sit down and have a conversation about why we're doing that. Probably not necessary. But 2 times is not a bad idea. You're going to work on your financial aid applications. You can't actually do financial aid applications until next year. Okay, there are things you could think about right now, but you cannot do them until October of your senior year. And then we've got some events that we want you to come to. So that's in September, we do a post-high school planning night where we're going to give you those forms, and we're going to say, here's what you do to ask for your teacher recommendation. Here's the office you go to for your financial aid appointment, and all those details. So please come back. Okay, so what is in a college application? I'm going to list all of these, and then I'm going to explain all of them. So if any of them are confusing to you, don't worry. There's the college application itself, right? So that's where you put everything from your basic info, your name, to your essay, your activities, all of that. There are teacher recommendations. Most colleges either require or highly recommend teacher recommendations. There are counselor recommendations. There's your transcript, SAT and ACT scores, application fees, which I'll get into, and then the financial aid application. All right, so let's see. The common application. Raise your hand if you have heard of the common application. We'll start there. Raise your hand if you know what it is. Raise your hand if you know it so well that you could explain it for me. Great, okay. But that's good that many of you know what it is. So the common application is basically an account, it's a website, it's an account that you'll create online, and it's one application that goes to many, many schools, hundreds and hundreds of schools accept the common application. It's basically a way to streamline the process, right? So you used to have to fill out, an application for BU, and then an application for Northeastern, and an application for UMass. And now you do that once, and then you just add your schools and you send it off to them, all on the same website. A lot easier, right? So there's one exception. There's one, it sounds really easy, it gets a little harder, I'll tell you in a second, but mostly it's easier. So that is important. You can start that now. They used to not let you start that until senior year, but now you actually can start that process and it'll all carry over. So if you want to get a lot of that out of the way, start thinking about your activities, and that's something you can do now if you want to. There are more than 500 colleges and universities that accept it. More and more are accepting it every year. There are some that don't accept it and probably never will. Our neighbors down the street in MIT like to do things their own way. They will probably never accept the Common Application, so you're going to have to do the MIT application. There are some other schools like that, a couple of the state schools, but many of them are on the Common App. Okay, so what's on it? Basic information. So a lot of this is just kind of time-consuming. It's your name, it's your birthday, it's talking to your parents about, where do they work and how long have they worked there, and how long have you lived in the house that you've lived in, and listing all of your courses, and kind of basic information like that. There's also a section for activities. This could be done in 10 minutes. I highly recommend you take longer than that, okay? So there's a space where you can list all of your activities that you're involved with in school or outside of school. So an after-school job, it counts. Family responsibilities that you have, that counts, okay? So you need to list kind of all of the activities in your life that are important to you. So if you have, if you clear the table after dinner every night, I don't know if that's an activity, right? But if you have significant responsibilities where you take care of your younger brother, you walk them home from school, and then you care for them, that is a significant activity. This is kind of like a resume, right? So you could just kind of list them and say like, oh, basketball team, Frisbee, High School Musical, and that's fine. Or you can actually describe what does that mean, right? Like what leadership roles did you take, and what part did you play, and what position did you play, and what teams did you make, and so that makes a difference for schools. Just listing activities, or knowing, that you were the one that every day got the cones set up for practice, and you cleaned them up after practice every day, or whatever the thing is. Okay, so just be specific. Then. Oh, religious activities count too. Sorry, I didn't mention that. But if you spend a significant amount of time at your church or your synagogue or whatever it is, that's important. And then it also includes the essay. Sean was talking about this a little bit. There's something called the personal statement. There are 7 questions that you can choose from. The 7th question is any other topic that you want to write about. So essentially, you can write about anything. Okay, but there are prompts if that helps you think about maybe an essay topic. This is important. It's 650 words. That is a hard cutoff. So it's not a very long essay, and there isn't something specific that you have to write about. It just has to feel like it's authentically about you, okay? So we'll, Sean's doing a little thing on the essay later. We're gonna have plenty of support for you for your essay, but this is kind of the main essay that goes to all the colleges, all right? So if you can get this done over the summer, you'll be in good shape. Okay, so here's where it gets a little harder with the Common Application. So you fill everything out once, you send it out to all the different schools. But then there are some schools that want a little bit, or most schools want a little bit more information, okay? So that ranges from UMass Boston will ask you as simple as like, what do you want to major in at our school? Do you want to live on campus or not? Is any member of your family an alum? It'll be 3 simple questions and that's it. But then there are schools that are going to ask you additional essay questions, like Tufts. The most common supplemental question that you will get is why our school? Why Tufts? Why BU? Whatever it's, why Bates College? Why, I don't know, UC, not UCLA, that is just as important, if not more important, than your personal statement. Those specific essay questions or short answer questions that a college asks you, think about it. They have decided that these are the most important ones to them. That's why they're adding it. That's why they're saying, if you want to apply to our school, yeah, that's great, you did the essay, you have to answer these questions too. Those are very, very important to a school. And oftentimes, people spend a lot of time on your main essay, get to your supplements, and then have to rush through it because you didn't plan accordingly, okay? So please take the time to carefully consider these supplements. Questions on Common App before I go forward? Great. So then, oh yes.
Just a really dumb question.
Probably not.
Create Common App. So I assume there's a way to just kind of create
Absolutely, yes. So you do not have to do it all in one sitting. You can start it now, save it. You can submit it to some schools and not submit it to others yet. There is a limit to how many times you can edit it after you submit it. So that gets a little technical, but yes, you don't have to submit it right away. You can work on it and edit it as much as you want. Yes.
Specifically, what are those limitations to the editing process?
So they actually just changed it, so I don't want to give you the correct. They used to say you could only edit it twice after you submit it. I honestly don't recommend that. I would say just be done. By the time you're going to submit to BU, be ready to submit to Northeastern. People use it sometimes because they want to like put something specific in their essay, which I think is just getting into dangerous ground, because if you don't proofread that correctly and you're like putting something about Northeastern in that might go to BU, I would just recommend being done.
How do I get those resources that could give me the information?
It'll be on Common App online.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
But yes, you can edit it afterwards, I just wouldn't recommend it. So then there are some college applications that are not on the Common App. So like I said, MIT, a couple other schools. The UC schools, anybody thinking of applying to California schools? Okay, so the UC schools are not on Common App, they have their whole own process. So, yeah, they have their own little Common App, so that's a whole different process. So some schools, you'll just have to do their own essay. Oftentimes it's actually simpler than the Common App, except in the cases of the really selective schools like the MITs, but it'll be a very similar format. Your basic demographic information, they may ask for an essay, they'll ask you about your activities. It's just, you just have to do it. You'll go to the school's website and you'll do it through their website. Okay, so in the application itself, whether it is Common App or through their own application, here are some of the things they are looking for. So I talked a little bit about this, but the essay itself, there's not one topic that's better than others. Kids will come and say, oh, I don't know, I haven't done anything exciting, or I haven't had some like major life-altering event. It doesn't have to be about that, okay? Sometimes the best essays are sort of about the smallest things, as long as it's about you, okay? Sometimes it doesn't have to be about what you want to be when you're older. It doesn't have to be about, again, like some big adversity that you overcame. It certainly can be, but all it is a chance for you to communicate, just like Sean was saying, who you are and what your voice is, so that they can read that and they can kind of figure out, like picture you at their university, okay? And picture you in their classrooms and in their student groups and, leading discussions on things. So it just has to be about you. And you have to answer the question. That's a big problem too. Sometimes the question is like, write about someone that you admire and how that has affected you. And people write about someone they admire and never talk about themselves. And then the school's like, that's great, now I'd really like to offer your grandmother admission to our school, and I know nothing about you, right? So you just have to be careful, make sure you're talking about you're making it about you. And this can be really tricky, so we are here to help. And you might write a couple different versions of this. I have lots of resources to help you kind of with the brainstorming process, so let me know if you want that. And then activities, like I said, it's important to how you describe them, how you present them is really important, okay? And then in terms of activities, I've got a bunch of juniors sitting in front of me. This doesn't mean like go out and join 5 clubs next year, okay? So quality is much more important than quantity. So if you've been involved in the musical since you were in 9th grade, that is a significant time commitment. That is a significant, that shows what your interests are. That doesn't mean you have to go out if you're like, oh, I only did that in one other club. That's okay, all right? That's who you are. That's what you had all of your time dedicated to that. So it is important that they see a commitment. It is important that they kind of, and that it makes sense in the context of your whole application, okay? They can kind of tell if you just joined a club to join a club, right? So that's that. Anything on college applications themselves before I go through all the kind of other materials that go with it? Yes?
So, because I wanna English language learner, I have to take a test, so where should I take it? Before my junior year or my senior year?
Are you talking about the TOEFL?
That one.
Will you remind me when I get to the SATs to ask you that, to answer that question? Okay. Great. All right, teacher recommendations. So now is the time to start thinking about who you are going to ask for your teacher recommendations. You usually need 1 or 2 teachers. There are some schools that will allow you to submit 3, 4 recommendations. It gets really tricky when you try to do that because some schools will not allow you to do that. 2 is more than sufficient. If you have some real strong, legitimate need to ask a 3rd teacher, talk with your counselor and we can work it out. But 2 is usually plenty. You don't have to ask specific subjects. Some people think, oh, I have to have one like humanities and one math science. That's not true. The way you can kind of think about this and help you choose, it should be a core academic teacher. Now, the exceptions to that are, if you want to go study art, then you should ask your art teacher, right? Okay, so that's fine. But otherwise, it really should be one of your core academic classes. So English, math, science, social studies, world language. Or if you are in CTE, that shop that you're in can be one of your core academics. It should be a teacher that knows you well as a student. So this happens a lot. Kids come in and they say like, oh, but I'm so close with Miss So-and-so. And that's wonderful. But the teacher recommendation is to write about you as a student. So you may know that teacher very well, but do they know you as a student? And then they'll say, oh, well, no, I only had them for an elective freshman year. I haven't had them since then. And that's great. Maybe they can be an extra personal recommendation, but the teacher recommendation should be about you academically as a student. When college admissions officers are reading this, they want to know, what are you going to be like in our classrooms, okay? What do you like in discussions? How do you handle group projects? How is your voice shown in the classroom, or through your work, or whatever it is? They're not one specific thing they're looking for, but they're trying to figure out if you're going to fit academically. The counselor recommendation is the place to put the rest of your life together, right? So they're the ones that should talk about all your other activities, or maybe if there's a family situation you want them to explain, or anything like that. The teacher recommendations might also mention that you were the captain of the soccer team, or that, because it affected your work, or whatever. But the main part of your teacher recommendation should be about you academically, okay? So think about who knows you well academically. You don't have to have gotten A+ in every single test that you took in that teacher's class. If you struggled to pull off a B, but you went after school all the time, and your teacher saw how hard you worked, and they saw the progress that you made, well, that would be a perfect person to ask for a recommendation. If you got like only C's and D's in their class ever, I would maybe think twice about that teacher, okay? But not necessarily. There's always an exception to that. So, talk to me or your counselors if you're having trouble figuring out who that should be. You can go back, sorry, I might have. They're submitted through Naviance. We'll go into the kind of process of that next year. You're going to request them on your Naviance account. They're going to submit it through your Naviance account. There's no mailing. There's no, it all goes through that. So we'll go over that process with you senior year. Any questions about teacher recommendations? We usually have some. Yes? That's a good question. The question was, do we get to read the teacher recommendations? As part of our process, as part of the yellow form that I sort of kind of referenced earlier that you're going to hand in, there's going to be a question about whether you waive your right to see your recommendation. The reason we do that, and you should do that, we encourage you to do that. If you don't waive your right, the teacher actually, or counselor might say, like, I don't think I want to write this. Now, it's not because they want to secretly write these terrible things about you and they don't want you to see it, okay? It's because colleges ask the same thing. On your Common App, there's going to be a question that says, do you waive your FERPA right, which is an educational act, like a privacy act, basically, where you get to see all of your educational record. They're going to say, do you waive your right to see this recommendation? Any idea why? And colleges want you to waive that right. Certainly not required to, but that's what they encourage. Yeah?
So they can get like a real picture.
Exactly. So when your teacher writes these wonderful, glowing things about you, they know that it's true, and it's not because your mom was bullying them over the phone to write a good recommendation, okay? So it feels a little weird to like have to waive a right to see something. So I recognize that, and I'm happy to talk to people about that. And you're certainly not required to, but again, it is really best practice because they want to know that it's important that they're confidential. Now, if a teacher chooses to show it to you, they can certainly do that. A lot of times at the end of the year, or after the applications have gone out, teachers say like, hey, I wrote this really nice letter, I want you to see it. And that happens a lot, but it's really to protect the integrity of the recommendation itself. Counselor recommendations. So first of all, don't assume that your counselor is going to write a recommendation for you. Not all colleges require them. So you need to have that conversation and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be applying to four-year schools that are going to need a recommendation, so they can start thinking about that. Their job is, like I said, to kind of put the whole picture together. Their job is to pull you together as a full human being, all right? So if you had maybe a rough time academically sophomore year because you got a concussion in soccer and you had a hard time. That's their job to explain, hey, like look at this rough patch, this is what happened, right? They're gonna probably discuss with you, if there's anything you feel really strongly you want them to write about, you should tell them that as a family or a student. They may, you certainly can't dictate your letter, but if there's something that you say like, hey, remember when I did have those really rough grades, do you mind mentioning that it was because of the concussion? Like, I think that's important for colleges to know. Just that you're welcome to kind of have that discussion. It also, sometimes those special circumstances are maybe really difficult things that you've gone through, and students often feel that the pressure that they have to write their essay about those difficult things, sometimes that's actually really hard to do, and so it might be helpful, if you want, to have your counselor kind of address it. Really difficult, we've had students who, had really difficult home situation for a year, and they don't want to have to feel like they have to explain it, but they feel like colleges should know. So feel free to talk to your counselor about that. Go ahead. All right, your transcript goes, this is an easy one. Your transcript has your grades, all the courses that you took, and all the grades that you got. By the time we submit it senior year, it will include, as long as you're not applying early, if you're applying for the regular decisions, which is in January, it will include your first term grades and the courses that you're taking senior year. We then update it in mid-year. So then we send it to all of your colleges again after the end of second quarter. Yes?
So in terms of grades, is it like general grades or is it like super specific?
No. It's the grades that you got each quarter. Yeah. So what are they looking for in your transcript? They're looking for you to have challenged yourself, okay? And they're looking for you to have done your best work. Now, does that mean every single student needs to have all AP courses by the time they're in senior year? No, right? But if you're getting straight A+ in honors English every single year and in honors history, and you never challenge yourself with an AP, they might just ask that question. Doesn't mean you're gonna kind of get knocked out of the team, but they want to see, oh wow, they did really well in honors history 9th grade, so they tried AP US history sophomore year, or whatever it was, okay? It's important to challenge yourself. That looks different for everybody. So sometimes the honors course is how you're challenging yourself. So that looks different, but when you are ready to, it's important to challenge yourself for those courses. Have you done your best? Showing improvement. So if you had a rough time adjusting to high school freshman year, that's okay, right? You want to show improvement. It's not good to go the other way. So if you started off really strong and you're starting to lose your motivation, come talk to someone, because we've got to pull that back up, because these most recent grades are going to be really important. Great. SATs and ACT scores. Okay, so like I said, you're going to want to take SAT or ACT. Those are completely interchangeable. If you decide to take the ACT and you do better on that, you can just send that. You don't have to send your SAT scores. They are completely interchangeable. Okay? Schools accept either one. They use them to standardize admissions, right? So it's kind of a necessary evil, but it exists. There is an August SAT this year, which is fairly new. It started last year, so I highly recommend that. I will say we do host it here with very limited capacity. So we don't have a whole lot of proctors that are available in late August. So we have a limited capacity here. If you want to take this August SAT, I would sign up like when you get home today, because there are not a lot of schools that offer it, and it goes very quickly. We had some students who had to go to New Hampshire last year to take it. It's not great. Okay, so then there's also the TOEFL, which I remembered your question. I'm proud of myself. If English is not your first language and you've been speaking it for less than maybe 5 years, you may need to take an exam called the TOEFL. It does cost a little bit of money, so we should talk about, there are some reduced fees that we can get. And you can take it next year, okay? And we have a lot of resources to help you with that. There's an oral part, there's like a listening part, and a written part. So this is important. Students or families, you are responsible for submitting your SAT and ACT scores. That is not part of your high school record. You are responsible for submitting that. This is not the only time you're going to hear that, I promise, but it's important for you to know that. So you'll go directly through your website, through your College Board website, you'll submit your scores directly to schools, okay? The SAT does cost money, sending scores does cost money, so just be aware that that might start to add up a little bit. Questions about SAT, ACT? Not, yeah.
Are there any financial reprieves when it comes to sending SAT scores?
So if you signed up with a fee waiver, if you get free or reduced lunch, if you signed up with a fee waiver, you get 4 sends for free. So you can send them to 4 colleges for free. And then anybody who signs up at all, even if you paid, you also get 4 for free, but you have to send them within a certain period after taking your exam, which is usually before you know your scores, so it's a little bit not ideal.
Does it cost money to reset, like, a separate SAT?
Yes. Yeah, so you probably want to wait until like your last SAT to send everything, because then you can send everything at once rather than, you know, having to pay more.
How long does it take after taking the SATs to get your scores back?
About 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
The essay sometimes takes a little bit longer.
So the SAT and the ACT, if you take, you should probably take both and just see which one you do better on, right?
Yeah, it's a good strategy. Not everybody wants to. We don't have as many ACT prep resources, so like we don't have as many classes, so sometimes people are a little hesitant about that. But yeah, absolutely. Take one of both and see how you do.
And so both work for all colleges?
Yes.
Okay.
There are some schools, before I do application fees, that are not requiring SAT scores, and they are growing. So a number of state schools have recently dropped SAT score requirements, so UMass Boston, UMass Lowell, Salem State, Framingham State, there are probably more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, have now said you don't have to submit SAT scores. So if you're just someone who really struggles on tests, that's okay. There are also some of the most selective schools in our country are test optional, have just said, you know what, this test doesn't measure what we need it to measure. We care about your grades, we care about who you are as a person. So there's a really cool website called fairtest.org if you want to look for test optional schools. You know, Bates College is in Maine, very selective private liberal arts school is test optional. Brandeis in Waltham is test optional. Many more. Application fees. Believe it or not, it costs money. This whole process costs money. To submit, every application that you submit, there's a fee, okay? So they could be anywhere between like $50 to up to $100 for each application. So if you get free or reduced lunch here, we can give you 8 college application fee waivers, so you'll be able to send 8 for free. If you do not, it's important to know that this is no small expense. This adds up if you're applying to 8 or 10 schools. So just be aware that this is a thing. There are some schools that will just give you school-specific fee waivers, so anybody who wants to apply to Tufts, it's free for Somerville students. If you go visit a school sometimes, they'll give you a little fee waiver that says like, hey, you can apply for free, just use this code. So there are ways, and certainly if you're struggling, maybe you don't get free reduced lunch, but you can't afford to pay all of these fees, you can certainly contact schools and say, hey, this is gonna be hard for me. And usually they'll be able to give you, reduce it or waive it for you. Yes?
So when you apply through the Common App, it's a separate fee for each school?
Correct, yes. Every time you submit, you have to pay. Yeah. Financial aid. I won't talk too much about this, but, oh, well, I guess you guys are missing the workshop on that, so I will talk a little bit about it. But your financial aid applications will be done next year. So there are 2 main applications called the FAFSA and the CSS profile. The FAFSA is the one that every college is going to ask you to do, and then certain private schools will ask you for the CSS profile, which is a more in-depth financial aid application. In October is when they both become available, October 1st, so you can fill them out then. And we have someone here, as I mentioned in the beginning, from U Aspire 2 days a week to help you with that process. You certainly don't have to use those services. If you feel really comfortable filling it out for your family, that's fine, but they are there to help students and families. You know, families can come in and meet with them, students can do it, and they'll help you with that whole process. There's a lot I could talk about here, but I guess I'll just ask if anybody has questions about the financial aid process. No? Okay, great.
I'm sorry, did you say it was due in October?
It becomes available in October. The due dates are specific by school. It's usually around the, like a month after the application process itself. If you're applying early decision, a lot of times they'll ask for it with the early decision deadline, which is in November. So, depends on the school. Actually, I should mention that, because of that, so if you think about October, you think about what taxes you have ready, you don't have that year's taxes, obviously, so they use prior year. So this year, when students were filling it out, they used 2016 taxes. So basically the last taxes that you prepared is what they will use for your financial aid process. So student responsibilities. Okay, so students in the room, or families if you want to communicate this to your students later. So it is your job to sign up for your SATs and ACTs. It is your job to do the college research. Now, does that mean we're not going to help you at all? No, of course not. But, you know, we can give you the tools, and then I can't tell you how much of a difference it makes if you are the one who's able to go onto the college website and really figure out how to navigate that. Do they have the major that I want? Do they have the student club that I want? Where are they located? What kind of supports are there? How do I schedule a student tour? We will show you how to get all of that information, but this process is so much better when you own that, when you feel empowered to really do all that research yourself. This is your process. I am not going to that college. You are, okay? So you need to really be invested in doing that research. It is your job to do the college applications. Again, we're not just going to kind of tell you this once and then hope that you get it done. There are a lot of support. There's a lot of support available, but it is your job to know when your applications are due. It is your job to do that essay. It is your job to get everything done with as much help as you want from us, but it's in your court. You need to request your teacher and counselor recommendations. You need to request your transcripts. Then it's our job to send them. Okay, then it becomes our responsibility. But you need to follow the process, and you need to meet the deadlines for that. Every single year, we have students who come and say, hey, I need a recommendation, it's due tomorrow. Your counselor cannot write that. It is not fair to them. They probably have recommendations that are due tomorrow that someone asked them for 2 weeks ago, right, that they've been carefully planning out when they're gonna write them. They're probably gonna say to you, okay, the deadline's tomorrow. I will write your recommendation, it's not going to be in by tomorrow, okay? You have to let them know, and this is gonna be all in the forms that you get next year, you have to let them know at least 2 weeks in advance to write your recommendations, okay? And that's really not a problem. It really shouldn't be a problem because all you have to do is request it from them. As soon as you know you need one, you can ask it from them. But please don't ask them at the last minute. Same thing with your teachers. They're not gonna be able to write a good recommendation for you in 1 minute. Did I get that one? Okay, the last one is, or the last two, you need to check your email. You have to be checking your email. Colleges are gonna send you things, I'm gonna send you things, financial aid is gonna send you things. You submit your FAFSA, you think you're done, and then you get an email that says, hey, you've been pulled for verification, we need all these documents sent to all these places by this deadline, and if you never read your email, guess who just lost their chance at a lot of financial aid, okay? Please read your email. Get in the habit now, it's very important. And then you have to send your SAT scores, which I mentioned before. All right, so families. It's your job to, assist in whatever way possible, help them stay organized, and help communicate with us, okay? So if your student's struggling, reach out to us. If you're confused about something, reach out to us. We're here to help. We can't, we're not mind readers, so we certainly can't figure out a problem if we don't know it exists. And then do what you're doing right now, which is being here, which is great. And then financial aid is really where your students are gonna need you. They're gonna need family information, so family taxes, W-2s, statements like that. So they're gonna need you for that. It is our job to communicate with you, to kind of guide you through this process. Like I said, everything on that student responsibility list, it is ultimately your job. It's our job to help you with it, okay? So you're not alone, but we do need you to really run that process. We need to send your transcripts and your school information, and we send your counselor and teacher recommendations. All right, and then for you to know, kind of coming up, we have, or the two main ways you're gonna get support. One is X-Block meetings. So we've started doing those with juniors. We have a couple more of those happening in June where we kind of pull you together to give information like, hey, here's where your counselor brag sheet is. Here's where your teacher recommendation brag sheet is. So you'll get a pass if you're, have you all been to an X-Block meeting already with your counselor? Great, okay, good. So we'll do that a couple more times throughout the year. And then individual meetings should be happening with you and your counselor about your college plans. If they haven't gotten to you yet, it's okay to kind of knock on the door and say, hey, can we have our meeting, all right? Because that's really gonna be very important.
get into some minutes, going to pull up the presentation. I am Jeremy Rachal. I'm a school counselor here. We are talking about the SATs. Is that what everyone wants to be hearing about? All right, great. I'm going to tell you guys, it's going to be a long presentation about this, but I am no means an expert on the SATs, because it has changed so much over time. So I will do my best to kind of give you as much information as possible about it and answer your questions, okay?
This is the SAT or the ACT?
Yeah, ACT as well. Okay, this is a small group, so just before I start, I want to get a feel of like who I have in this room. I don't recognize everyone in here, but I know some people. Are you guys, what grades are your son or daughters in?
11th grade.
11th grade? 11th? 11th? Okay. Okay. So 10th, so this is, huh?
I don't have a kid.
Okay. Well, what grade are you in?
10th.
10th grade, okay. So that gives me kind of a sense of when we're talking about the SATs, the relevance of it. Sophomore and junior year is when it really gets serious, but you've probably been hearing from the SATs for quite some time, correct? Or the ACTs, for that matter. As I said, I'm Jeremy Rachal. I'm a school counselor here. I've been here for 2 years, but I've been in this profession now for 11 years, so I have a lot of experience around the SAT and kind of talking to students about it. And I'll do my best to kind of share with you kind of how that process works today. Okay. So, we're going to learn about the PSAT today. We're going to talk a little bit about that. For those of you who said you were a sophomore, you would have taken the PSAT your sophomore year. You should know what that is. The SAT and the ACT. We're also going to talk about subject tests, what those look like, what they mean. And we're going to talk about test optional schools, also how you prepare for the SATs, and an individual timeline and a preparation plan. By no means what I say today or what I suggest is something that you have to do, okay? These are just suggestions. What we tell students and families all the time is it's a case-by-case basis with students and to kind of talk to your school counselor about it, okay? So, the PSATs, does everyone know what that is? Have an idea? It's free. Your son or daughter takes their sophomore year. It's a practice SAT, okay? It basically gives them the chance to enter for the National Merit Scholarship. It's the beginning of the college process, and students take it in their 10th and 11th grade. For those of you that don't know what a baseline is, it's basically you didn't study, you just took the PSAT. You're not going to get probably the score that you necessarily think you want to get for colleges. So for instance, if you're hearing 1400 is a good score and you don't get 1400 on your PSATs, does that mean you did poorly? Absolutely not, okay? So something to consider here is this is what you did without studying, okay? So it's a good baseline. Part of it, there's basically an evidence-based reading test, also writing and language. And what's different between the SATs is it's only out of 15, 20. So a lot of students will get confused with that. They'll be like, what's this out of? It's basically out of 760 on each section. There's 4 multiple choice answers instead of 5, which is on the SATs. And the right to only scoring 1 point for correct answers. There's no deductions for incorrect, which is good, or blank answers. And it's 2 hours and 45 minutes. Typically, school counselors, we will get these and we will share them with students in both their sophomore and junior appointments. I tell students all the time, you should not stress out about your PSAT scores. By no means do they determine how, it's just a baseline. Most of my students could go sometimes 200 points more than what they got on the PSAT after studying. For the components of the SATs, it's basically 3 hours. For those adults in the room, it's gone back to 1600. So like we grew up, okay? It was 2400 for a while. I worked in college admissions at Northeastern. There was a writing section part of it. We didn't even look at it. No one really looked at the writing test. A lot of students did do well on it, but it's something they just decided it was just too much for the students to do. So they changed the test back to essentially a critical reading and math. It's out of 800 on each section. There's a reading section, which is an hour. Language and writing is 35 minutes. 55 minutes for math section with a calculator, 25-minute math section with no calculator, and then we'll talk about this a little later. There's a 50-minute essay. This is optional, okay? Students don't have to do it. I'm going to be a little redundant on this. My recommendation is that your first time on the SATs, you do the optional essay. The reason is some schools actually require it. I will hand out some, basically a list of schools right now that actually require it and some that don't, okay? And that's also subject to change. I can tell you every year the admission cycles changes. Just because a school doesn't require an essay on the SATs this year, doesn't mean they can't turn around next year and say, actually, we want the essay. So that's why we recommend the students do it. On the SATs, the ranges are from 400 to 1600s. There's no penalty for incorrect answers. There's 4 multiple choice options instead of 5. There's evidence-based reading and writing. There's a deeper focus on fewer math concepts. 1 math section without a calculator, fewer longer sections. So this is the differences between the PSATs to the SATs. When you take it, this is a complicated one, it's case by case. I personally had students take it sophomore year. I'm going to just be transparent, I'm not a fan of it. Taking it sophomore year where I feel students can do well on the math because we have students taking advanced level of math that's already covered. I do not feel that the students have a fair chance on the reading-based section. They have not developed enough critical reading thinking skills, which go through junior year. We're putting our students in an unfair advantage. That doesn't mean that sophomores don't do well on it. Trust me, in my career, I've seen some kids do phenomenal on it. But if you don't, I think that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on a student, their first score. Whether they say it's not, you're going to make pressure. Every student's different, but in my experience, a lot of students get that first score, and it's really like, oh my God, this is how I did. So in my professional opinion, I would love to see a student as prepared as possible, okay? So that's why we recommend it in the 11th grade. Students should take it 1 to 3 times. It's recommended to take it twice. Taking it 3rd time is recommended only in certain circumstances. I don't know, like this is a case-by-case basis that you work individually on with every student and a school counselor. And you ask that question. Every student's different. The 3rd time could be a burnout. It all depends on the student. What I would say to this is there's something, I don't know if I'm going to go into this later in the slides, but there's something called super scoring. So the way it works, as I said, it's out of 800 on every section. The way college and universities works is something called score choice when you set your scores. Colleges and universities, let's take Harvard and Yale out of the equation here, but most are going to take your highest score. So if you take basically the SAT 3 times, you're going to submit your highest scores for critical reading and math. The colleges are going to want to see your highest critical reading score and your highest math score. If you take the SATs once, you're not really giving yourself a fair chance to get the best score. It is a little frustrating for me because I have some pretty bright students that get like a pretty good score and they'll take it once, but I hate questioning, man, if they took it 1 more time, what could that look like? Now here's the beauty of it too. Let's say you guys all take it a 2nd time and you go down, that's our little secret. You don't submit that score. That's between you and the College Board. So taking it a 2nd or 3rd time does not penalize you. Does that make sense?
When do you choose to submit it, before or after?
I never recommend ever submitting it before.
Oh, so you can see it and then decide.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
You can submit it before, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. You don't know what your score is.
But do you choose an English score from one test taking and a math from the other, or does it have to be a particular
It's so
test
frustrating. It's a little confusing. You'll see it on College Board. It's basically you choose whatever math you want for the highest, but that's going to follow the other critical reading score from that test section.
So they're linked essentially.
They are, yeah.
By the test date.
I kind of wish you could just take your highest scores. Guys, keep in mind for college rankings, you ever heard of like US News World Weekly? The way they do those rankings for schools is the SAT scores. So it's in the institution's best interest to take your highest score. So for years, this is why score choice got created, because we could not convince parents and students that basically they're going to take the highest score. We just couldn't do it. It's basically admissions in college. At Northeastern, I'm telling you from someone who file read, I didn't care how many scores I saw come in. I was taking the highest critical reading and the highest math. And that's all I was looking for. And that's what I was using as my average. And most institutions do that. But
so then there's an advantage to submitting multiple scores if there's been variance in the way a kid did.
Exactly, because you're going to what we call super score. But taking the test 6 or 7 times, that's aggressive.
Right.
Then you lose in kind of like reliability on the score, and you kind of, if I were to see it 6 times, it's very rare we ever see that happen with a student. But that's why 3 is kind of like acceptable, case by case. We also don't want to burn out students as well. Keep in mind this is a very long test, and it can be really by the 3rd time, it can be really mentally draining. So that's a conversation you have with the counselor, but by no means does the counselor make that decision. It's the family and the student, and they really just kind of take our advice. These tests are offered in March, May, June, August, October, November, December, almost a whole year, except September, which I don't know why. And I really wish it was offered in September. It'd make my life a little easier. A little tidbit on this, August, we do have now, that wasn't before. Most students will take it, and it's offered here. But this is all through College Board. We don't control this, so it all depends on when you register. If you register towards the end, there's no guarantee you would get Somerville High. So if you're thinking about taking an SAT test, it's just best to do it maybe a couple months in advance, signing up for it so you can get your first preference for the test site. As I said before, some schools are going to recommend basically the essay. I'm going to send you, I'm just going to kind of pass around this, if you mind just pass this around for me. Like I said before, guys, this is just today. And this is what we know today. Next year, this could all change. Which schools have the essay, the SAT can change. I'm still going to say I recommend the first time a student does take the SAT, doing the essay, see how you do. If you don't do well on it, don't do it again. Some students do pretty well, though. We have a lot of students that are really good kind of like writers. So if you're going to showcase something that's positive for you, there's no need to hold it back. Most colleges have created and posted their SAT, essay policy. Just look for all your schools. It will tell you for every single school you apply to what is required. So when you're doing something called the common application and you're looking at the requirements of the school, right there it's going to tell you if the essay is required or not. If you don't have any idea where you might want to apply, it's better to take the optional essay. As I said, just gives you more of an opportunity. Yes, sir.
Is the essay more of like an open question, or is it like the long composition on the MCAS?
More like a long composition. I don't know the exact number, Owen. And this is something when you guys go to test prep, we'll talk about a little later. These are questions you can ask test prep coordinators what that looks like and exactly what you can do to prepare for that. If you take the SAT with the essay, you must send the essay scores to the schools. You cannot choose to send only the SAT scores. So that's something to keep in mind. If you don't necessarily do well on it, you can't hide it. You gotta send it with it. But I'm gonna tell you, schools are still obsessed with just the critical reading and math. If you're applying to Tier 1 IVs, they might get a little obsessed with seeing a lower score, but if you're applying to your Northeastern BUs and kind of like pretty competitive schools, they're still gonna want to really just look at that critical reading and math score. I haven't really seen a student yet get a really high SAT score and get a low essay. It just hasn't happened yet, doesn't mean it couldn't, but most students who are gonna get a high critical reading score usually do pretty well in that essay section. ACTs. Does everyone here know what this is? So it's basically the SATs of the Midwest. A lot of Midwestern schools use it. In the South, yeah. I took the ACTs myself. I scored higher on them by a significant amount. I felt it was more of a fair test. That was my own personal opinion. The score range is 1 to 36. It's got English, math, reading, and the biggest difference is science. That's actually incorporated into the test. That's why, in my experience, we're talking to families and students about the ACT. I call it more of an academic test compared to more of a standardized test. The SATs is more of like a reasoning strategy test, where the ACTs is more just kind of like, what have you learned in high school, put it on paper, get a score. There's 4 sections, 2 hours and 55 minutes. It's the same thing when we start asking, how many times do you take the ACTs? 1 to 3 times. Just so you guys are aware, if your family is on free or reduced lunch, you're eligible for waivers for both the SATs and the ACTs. It's the same thing, we have waivers. Students just need to ask us for one, they get to take it twice for free. most schools want the SATs. It's not true. They will take pretty much every single. I haven't encountered a school yet that wouldn't take an ACT.
I know here we don't have as much for the ACT as like the SAT, but just in general, are there as many resources available, like booklets and online tests you can take for both?
Thank you for asking that question. I was going to cover that later. I did a little research experiment last year having students take the ACTs because I want to see how they do. The biggest issue I saw is that students didn't prepare for it, so the answer is no, unfortunately. We were really more of an SAT prep high school. That doesn't mean that you can't on your own look for resources, and I can't help you, but what I will tell you is student scores this last year, senior year, were significantly lower on the ACTs than they were on the SATs. What's frustrating to me though is when I spoke to Tufts admissions the year before, students from Somerville High were getting into Tufts based on their ACT scores and not their SATs. So that's why I kind of recommend it, but if you're not going to study for it, it's a waste of your time because I don't think the score will be reflective of your ability.
Is there a PACT the way there is for the SAT?
You know, it's a great, I don't know the answer to that question. There may be, we don't offer it, we only do the PSATs here. That's something I would actually have to look up. Is the ACT easier? I don't know, I think it's a case-by-case basis. I think it's an individual basis. I don't think I can make a generalization. It was easier for me. I scored higher in it, but it doesn't mean it's easier for my students. I always tell students to talk to each other, but I'm going to be honest with everyone in this room. These tests, if you don't study for them, you're not going to get as high as a score as you want. And it is very rare we have a student that sits down, doesn't study, and gets a 1600. I haven't seen it happen yet at this high school. I haven't really, in my 11 years of doing this, actually seen it. It's rare. You have to study. There's a lot of things that aren't really necessarily taught in our curriculum that are on this test. So preparing for it and understanding that this is what to expect is the only way to kind of get a high score in these high-risk tests.
Excuse me, are there schools that will just take the ACT?
No, that I'm aware of. Everywhere basically is taking both. There might be a school in the middle of the country that gets a little more ACT applicants than SAT, but they're still going to take both. If someone found one, I would like them to show me that won't take either or. I haven't seen that, but it just depends. If you're applying to probably schools around here, UConn, Northeastern, BCBU, I would venture to say, I know Northeastern we took more SAT scores than ACTs, but that didn't mean we didn't have ACT scores coming in. SAT or ACT or both. If you guys read the caption here, we were originally thinking SAT, but then Noah's admission advisor told us left-handed students born on Tuesdays do better on the ACT. That's a reality here to an extent. I still think I would argue on this, there is a science section that is vastly different. That's not on the SATs. So if science is a strength of your son or daughters, or any of you students in this room, you're probably going to want to showcase that skill, and that is a way to kind of get a higher score. So it's just something to think about. But I'm going to say this throughout this entire presentation. If you do not study, it's not going to matter. Yes, Owen?
Do colleges, like wherever they are in the country, that are more kind of focused on science majors, do they look more at the ACT because it has that science section?
No. They really just come up with a standard score for both that they're looking for. If I'm answering your question correctly, if you're applying as a science major at school, would ACT help you more? No. Because I'll get to it in a second, you could just take a subject test for the SAT in science, and that would cover that as well. That's a great question though. You would think, because that is a pretty large difference between just the regular SATs and the ACTs, but they still just look at the ranges. What are subject tests? We're going to go through right now. These are hour-long content-based tests. Many colleges require them. Testing your best subject is great to show off. Look at all, these are the ones that are offered. Typically what I'll say, is any of my students in here, or is anyone in an AP course? Owen, any of you guys? None? Okay, that's typically the students I recommend taking a subject test. The reason is it's easier because you really are studying the content that will be on that subject test. You're going to take what's called an AP exam at the end of the year. The AP and the subject test are kind of similar, so it's kind of, if you're already going to take the AP exam, you might as well take the subject test. It kind of helps you out. You You're gonna see something in here that might be a little confusing. Math level 1, math level 2. Level 1, I can't give you specifics, but it's like, just think of it as easier math, more algebra, geometry, trig. Level 2 is more advanced math. Level 2 is mainly for a student who's going to be an engineer or a chemist or going to go into the sciences and taking an AP Calc class. Level 1 is more for a student who might want to do business and need to showcase some math skills, but not more as an engineer. Does that make sense? Kind of. It all depends on the student, yes.
So if you take a subject test, do you have to submit that along with your SAT score? Okay.
I tell students this all the time. This is also kind of something cool about like that. Just try it, right? If you get like, let's call it 500, which is an average score, but let's say you're playing at Tufts and their average is 650, you don't need to submit that. I'd recommend taking it again and you submit the highest score. Good.
So it says many colleges require, do they just want to see that a kid did it, or they want to see it in a specific?
If they require it, you have to submit the score.
I mean, like they'll say, we want to see a math one, or they'll just say, we want to see one.
They never specify, but let's give an example. If your student's applying to engineering, you're going to want to take a math and a science one, a level 2, and basically maybe a physics or a chemistry. It all depends on the major. But I've never had a school say you have to take a specific one, but they will basically say you have to take 2, and you'll know range. The only school, and I heard Tufts is not doing this anymore, I haven't had as many schools recently require a subject test, but what I'm going to tell you all, if other students are taking it and you're not, doesn't that give more to their profile than you have? So it's in your best interest, if you're competing for more selective schools, the more you take, the better off. But I'm going to say this again, I'm speaking to a group right now, this is a case-by-case basis. I don't recommend subject tests to all my students. It really depends on how they are. If they've taken AP courses, where they're applying. It's funny that I'm doing the SATs right now because I'm a school counselor, but I don't love standardized tests. I don't think they're reflective of the whole story of a student, and I think they can really burn students out. So I'm not going to sit here and say you have to do X, Y, and Z. But unfortunately, the more selective schools will require it, yes.
Is this new? I don't remember this with my older son.
Subject tests?
Yeah, the subject tests.
Yes.
How, really?
They've been around since I was in high school.
Huh.
I couldn't tell you, maybe I've been out of school for like 16 years. I couldn't tell you maybe 20, 30 years ago if they existed, but they've probably been around since the advanced placement exams have been around. Like I said, not every school requires it, so it's not something you have to do, but like, sorry, as an example, Owen's an A push, which is AP US history. It behooves him not to at least try and take the test after he's gone through a whole AP course. So it's just another way to kind of showcase something you do. Also, I don't know if it's in these slides, but something I have seen, students will actually not do as well on the reasoning test, on the critical rating in math, but are really good in history or really good in English, and that would be their way to showcase basically, hey, I'm not a great test taker, but I'm really good at English, and I'm applying for your journalism program. Kind of those two align, so it's another way to showcase the skill.
I have another question.
Sure.
So, would we apply for these through the school, or like when John's taking the push test? Is it around that time? Like, how does it work?
A push is through the school. What she would do, that's in May. I'm recommending, and I sit down with the students, I will sit down with the Alex, and I recommend kind of a timeline for SATs for my juniors, case-by-case basis. But let's say a student's in the AP course, I typically like to see them do the reasoning test in May, junior year, let's say it's again junior year, and then do a subject test in June. But if you're in sophomore year, most of them will take it in June. Yeah.
In June of the year, they have the AP course?
Exactly. But you don't I have students that have taken an AP course and not taken the subject test. That doesn't mean you can't take the subject test a year later. You're just going to have to brush up on it.
And when do kids take, so if they're not taking an AP class until senior year, when would they take the subject test?
It's a good question, because they'd have to self-study.
Right.
So I don't have that happen often. That might be a family and a student might say you shouldn't do it. You might not need to.
So basically then you need to take an AP class as a sophomore or a junior in order to do well on these SAT subject tests? That's kind of screwy.
So that's a hard answer. No, not necessarily, but you're a little more set up for success if you're in a class that's basically the same thing, opposed to saying, hey, you gotta study on your own. You know, can a student do that? Some can. I don't have a ton of students that are gonna sit down there with all the books and all the material and self-study for one of these tests. If they are, I think they can do as well as anyone else, but the reality is I don't know. It depends on the student. So if I know they're already in a class that's rigorous, that's helping them for that, they're probably gonna be more set up for success, but there's no guarantee there either, right? Just because they're an A-push or if they're taking AP Comp Sci or any of these courses, doesn't mean they're gonna take a subject test and blow it out of the water. Some do. Some of my students in A-push took the subject test, didn't pass the AP exam, got a 3, but got a 700 on the subject test. Can I explain how they do that? I don't know. It's just, these things don't necessarily make sense. I don't agree that the SATs determines your success in your life, because I'm not a product of that. My SATs were low, and that didn't guarantee me anything, even though it says it does. So it just depends on the student, depends on how much they study. There's just no guarantee. Yes?
So then what are the asterisks next to your languages mean?
I don't know.
So
Sorry.
I had a really quick question.
They may, I don't know if they're offered every time, that could be it.
So I heard that some of the foreign language SAT subject tests have listening portions and others don't. How does that work?
I'm sorry, I did not have the answer to that.
And that they're only offered at certain times?
Yeah. I'm surprised that not all of them do. That's confusing to me. I'd imagine everyone would be similar, but I wouldn't recommend those, the foreign language tests unless a student was pretty advanced in the language, or if it was their native language, but also keep in mind with the native language, you might be able to speak it really well, but it doesn't mean you can read and write it, so that would also be covered on a subject test. Wow, the subject test guy, I want to answer some questions. Honestly, not all my students take subject tests. It just depends on the student. If you're applying to Tier 1 schools, Tufts, Yale, Harvard, Northwestern, Northeastern, BC, those types of schools, you're gonna have to compete with students. But if you're already applying to those schools, your requirements for your SATs are so high that naturally you're gonna be a good test taker. So when you take a test like this, you're gonna score well. But the reality is there are thousands of schools out there that don't require this. You don't need to do this. It's not something I'm going to push a student on. If they're not striving to go to the best school in the country, you don't have to do this. But if students want to, they can.
So you're saying that my son's taking a history, AP history, in his junior year.
Yeah.
He should take the subject test this year.
Yeah, and see how he does. And if he does well, awesome. It just and even if he's not going into history, it still showcases something that he did. If he doesn't do well, no one needs to know about it.
Is it the same thing, we'll see the score and then we decide if we want to send it?
Yes, absolutely. You said it. Oh, this is a great question. I don't know if it's covered here. The school doesn't, I get this question all the time from my students and families. We have nothing to do with your SAT scores. We can only view them. We can't send them. That's your personal property. Like that's your testing. You go straight to College Board. You have to send those yourself. What the school controls is obviously your transcripts. Those are your grades. We send the grades. But the SAT scores, students are responsible for sending those to the institutions they want to apply to. We will go over this in a second. Not all schools require the SAT.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So if someone was to take an AP language course their senior year, would they still be able to take the subject test early enough in the year in time for them to get the scores into their college applications?
Yes, I mean, but they wouldn't have the whole depth of the whole language course. You would have to self-study.
Assuming that they've taken previous years of the language throughout all of high school, if not earlier.
Without studying, it doesn't matter. You still have to study for the test. So as long as you study, it's going to help. Would it be easier if you went through the whole course? I think. But you can still do it. You're going to have to self-study regardless. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So you can take up to 3 in one day. Most of my students take 2. 3 is a lot. You could do these during sophomore year. The cost of these are $26 for one test, $20 for the other test. Keep in mind the bottom, the fee waivers, they're 2 per test. So if you take a subject test once and a reasoning test once, then your fee waivers are used. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, test optional schools. This is more of my language. I'm not a huge believer in the SATs being students basically end-all be-all. This is a list of schools that are what we call fair tests. Pass these around. I wish this was around when I was growing up. My GPA was far better than what my SATs were. My SATs did not represent who I was as a student. College admissions is starting to realize that there's all these students out there with like 3.7 GPAs, but around 1,000 on the SATs, and something's not lining up there. They're not saying that guarantees that the kid can't be successful in college, you know? So what a lot of schools have done, which is amazing, and the list continues to grow year by year, is they're basically saying, yeah, we still accept SATs, but if you don't want to submit them, you can still apply here. And if you look at that test, that list, I just, without even looking at it myself, I know Stonehill's on there, I know Bates and Bowdoin should be on there, I know Brandeis should be on there. These are very selective universities. These aren't low-tier, non-selective colleges that basically are not competitive. There's a lot of competitive schools on there that want to give all of our students a chance. So with that, they don't require them. There's no penalty for not sending scores. If you send scores, this is a tricky one. Colleges will evaluate them. I don't know how true that is. It depends on the school. We'll never know. So if you don't want to send them and you don't think your score is high enough, don't send them. If you do, they're going to look at them. But we don't know if that will factor into their decision or not. This is basically a website where you could find all the schools that don't require the SATs. Give me 1 second, Ellen. Essentially, right now, like I said before with the other list, this is just a list for right now. I think this list will continue to grow as we kind of move forward. Some schools are what's called test flexible. You don't have to send the SAT scores or ACT scores, but you basically have to send them something else. Some of them are going to want extra essay. I know Brandeis actually wants a subject test, going back to that. So you don't have to send your math or reasoning score, but they're going to want to see a subject test or an AP exam, something of that nature, to show that, you know, you don't need to submit the test, but what else have you done?
If you're going to schools and like talking to people that might be in admissions or just taking tours, are they generally pretty transparent about how much they factor SATs, or are they like secretive about that?
Oh, that's such a good question. Depends on the school, Owen. Okay. I mean, I think some schools can be pretty transparent. It's on their websites, you'll see the averages. But
they're going to tell you they take a whole variety of things into consideration.
Yeah, and I'll tell you guys the truth. The demographics game is something that my Somerville High kids don't play. Most of my kids apply what I call backyard schools, Northeastern, BU, Tufts, UConn, UMass Amherst. Those are right around the way. You're competing with all the kids throughout this area. So you're going to need pretty close to what they consider their average range. You start going down to Alabama, Florida. Let's not count California because the schools out there are ridiculously competitive, but let's start saying Washington State, Missouri, Pennsylvania. You're starting to play the demographics game. Then all of a sudden they're starting to look, how many kids have we ever taken from good old Somerville High? They may never have taken a student from here. Then all of a sudden they're looking at your SAT scores. Well, you might not be within their average range for their area, but they want a student from this region because they're not represented. So it helps out. I know at Northeastern, when kids were applying from Mississippi, we were taking them and accepting we were around the 1,400 range at Northeastern, and I saw kids getting in the 1,200s. But if a kid applied from here for the 1,200, they wouldn't get in. So it's just something to consider, but not something you have to do. It's just the way higher ed works. And check the requirements for every school. Just because the school is tax flexible this year doesn't mean they will be next year. We have no control or any way of knowing that, especially when the list keeps on growing.